Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fallout Podcast episode 1666. Not actually that, about 160. AKA I wake up in a pool of sweat from the waist down. It's a futile fall showdown, but not tonight. It's some sort of Halloweenish special, and we're very lucky to have a guest, Graham Duff from the long, long good years of many things, doer of things that we will touch on in a good way in this conversation, I hope. Graham, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Brendan. Good to be with you.
And also joined by Summer of Dan. How you doing, Dan?
Wonderful. Just to put the laundry out. It's beautiful in Bristol.
Yeah. And Alistair, the Pemberton Walker. How you doing?
Been looking forward to this for a while, and I've taken the day off work especially for it, and I've not put my laundry out yet.
Brilliant. So we're mid laundry for many of us. So the simplest.
I did most of my laundry yesterday. Actually, I did 2 loads because I came back from tour and I had a lot of fucking laundry. So yeah.
So you didn't go. You didn't go the Neil Young route of having a single T-shirt that you wash in a sink after every gig.
No, I'm too up myself for that. I can't do that.
Nice. So you gotta be respectable, haven't you? So the symbolist poet Paul Verlaine is reputed to have said the surest way to be a bore is to tell the truth. So in the spirit of that, please be as liberal as you can with your answers. But I wanted to start, Greg, by asking you about growing up in the weird Lancashire of 1970s and possibly the 80s or even earlier. But we're from Wigan, and we grew up in the kind of shadow of that the Civil War and the ghosts of Lady Mabel and those things. But for yourself, what did growing up in kind of in Lancashire and the psychogeography and are there any stories that have stuck with you through the years?
I think I was always, from being quite little, I was always fascinated by the notion of like witches. And I think it's because growing up in Lancashire, witches are just part of like, kids' conversation, or certainly they were. I don't know if that's still the case. And when I was, I think about 6, we moved to a house which is it's in the distance, but it's there. It's Pendle Hill, which you go around the back of the house and Pendle is there. And a bit like when I was a kid, I couldn't tell the difference between Greek mythology and Greek history. I thought Greek mythology was Greek history, that there actually had been, all these sort of fantastical creatures. I think I completely bought into the notion of witches as well. So that was always there, and I found it quite frightening. I remember seeing a TV show. What's it called? The Strange Report, is it? And there was it's an adventure series, and there was an episode about witches in that, and I remember I just couldn't sleep for days, and so that's a really big part of like my childhood, I think, is this notion of like witchcraft and sort of and them being close by, and maybe they were still there, and maybe they still wore black cloaks. So yeah, I had that on my mind a lot as a kid.
Yeah, in terms of the kind of real stories, but also that era of 70s Cold War TV, that whether it was the Donald Pleasant's Dark and Lonely Water or Children of the Stones or Threads or things like that. How about that side of things? How did that feed into kind of who you became?
I think like a lot of people of my generation, you started off with Doctor Who, and then you sort of became gradually aware of other things. And from 1976, seeing horror double bills on BBC Two on a Saturday night, usually starting off with a black and white RKO and then followed by a Hammer one. That was a big deal for me, and I think it's that thing as you grow up, you're sitting around. Well, of course, these were on all over the country, so a whole generation was affected by those, and you start to make these connections. And there was an era long gone now, really, where you couldn't quite remember. You'd seen something, you couldn't remember what it was called. There was an image from something, you didn't know what it was from, and now all those sort of dots have sort of been joined up by the internet, haven't they? So there was a period where there was a lot of internal knowledge, a lot of memories that people had, but the information wasn't catalogued for all to see. And so I think I know a lot of people bemoan that, it's all there. I think it's great, it's all there, because I couldn't be more engaged with new music and interesting films and things and contemporary art. But every week, 2 or 3 people will say, "Oh, do you know about this? Have you heard this?" And go, "Oh no, God!" And that's exactly my kind of thing. Yeah. I love the fact you'll never get to the bottom of it. But yeah, I think those sort of the sort of horror, sci-fi, weird fiction stuff. It's been said again and again, but it does feel like the 70s were a golden age for that. And also, it was a bit. I think there's been a lot of stuff done since that's more knowing. I think there was a naivety and that sort of crushing together of the sort of the strange, the spectral, and the sort of quotidian and the downbeat. I think that's something so specific to that era, and it's got such a quality to it. Whether it's Pender's Fen or Children of the Stones or whatever, it just feels like it's probably partly coming out of the hippie thing. This sort of re-engagement with the earth and with the past.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
So how do you feel about these kind of, you said knowing, like things like, you might not have seen them, but like Starvacre, and there was Harvest recently, which are very much playing with that iconography of 70s folk horror, but also kind of the way that looks back to a kind of the medieval ghostery uncertainty around nation, etc. Like, I don't know if you've seen them, so this might be a terrible question.
I've seen both of those. Yeah, Starvacre I really enjoyed. I think people who've read the book tend to view it a little bit more harsh, I think, because the book's obviously a subtler and more sophisticated and more expansive story. I've not read it, so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent, and I'm a big fan of the idea that atmosphere can trump meaning. I don't need, and I think we're too hooked up on meaning. And I think they're sort of like, well, it's one of the most deadening fucking questions when people say, "Is show them a piece of contemporary art." And they go, "What does it mean?" You think, well, who gives a fuck what it means? Yeah. It's like you wouldn't look at a painting of a vase of flowers and think, "Yeah, what does it mean?" It's just is the image, and I think it's important not to get too sort of like bound up in that. But yeah, I thought Starvacre was excellent. Harvest, I thought was an interesting one because it's definitely marketed, and this has happened with a few films recently. The trailer is really marketed as if it's a folk horror, and it's got a lot of the signifiers of folk horror in there. And you watch it and you think, oh, actually, it's about the Enclosure Act. It's not a folk horror at all. There's no horror in it, and I enjoyed it, but I thought it was a very rare example of a film which starts off being very weird and then gets increasingly normal. And that's a really odd trajectory. I can't think of any other films that are like that. It starts out with a guy forming cunnilingus on a tree, and by the end it is about the Enclosure Act. And I just sort of thought it's a strange trajectory. But scene for scene, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Of the two, I probably enjoyed Starvacre more. Another one that I saw, have you seen I Saw the TV Glow?
Oh, no, I saw the trailer for that. I've not seen the film, yeah.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic, but again, the trailer markets it as a horror film, and it just isn't. It's an autistic coming-of-age film. Anyway, sorry, I will just go, so you better interrupt.
Please do, because I remember I was listening to your interview with the handlers, and it was great interview, but I think there was a fork in the road where it was like, I think you dropped in the term folk horror, and they were like, oh, that's good, what's interesting, and then moved on to some more fall questions, which is what we're there for. But it's but I was like, just let him do 20 minutes on some folk horror,
Okay.
So no, it's I guess one of the questions that popped up, and these are going to be absolutely in no logical order at all, was the notion of the English countryside lending itself to horror, and obviously this relates directly to the otherwise. But yeah, what's your take on the English countryside itself and how our culture and landscape lend to those stories?
Well, see, I've got an interesting might not be though. I think I've got quite an atypical relationship with the countryside. We were touring recently in a van doing the Ideal Tour, and we were driving. I can't even remember where it was now because we've been all over the country. But we were going through this what was probably described as a majestic landscape, big hills and lakes and stuff, and everybody. I was in the front of the van, and it was wasted on me because everyone in the back of the van was going, "Oh wow!" And I find the countryside irritating. I'll be completely honest with you. I know what I'm supposed to feel. I know that I'm supposed to feel that, nature, and it nourishes my soul. I just think, come on, get out of the way. Let's get to the city. I have no interest in the countryside at all. And I think that, for me, probably translates into a sort of, because I find it slightly irritating, slightly, I don't know. People say, let's go for a walk. I think it's not going to be a long walk, is it? The countryside, it just does nothing for me, really. And I'm just thinking, get out of the way and then we can get to the city. That's what I think all the time. And weirdly, I think that's a thing I connected with Mark on, is like neither of us have had any interest in the countryside, the pastoral, all that. So I think that makes it easy for a writer like me to cast the countryside as something negative within a folk horror thing. I think another really interesting thing about folk horror that doesn't get talked about enough as well is that it is a working class horror, and a lot of horror is middle class and upper class. I'm a huge fan of Hammer films. I'm going to go and see a Hammer double bill next weekend. I love Hammer, but it's very, very upper class. And most, like Halloween, or they're middle class films. The folk in folk horror are the working class. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of folk horror. These are people that work with the land. They work with elements. There's a lot of early sort of demonic folk tales in the UK. The devil is cast not as something completely other and completely supernatural, almost like it's a beast of the field that has to be tamed. That if you can break the devil, you can do a deal with him, in the way that you might with a horse or whatever. So I find those kind of ideas fascinating.
It's all those ideas of the devil being much more tricky and sneaky and somebody you just have to be careful of than this kind of omnipotent, almost like evil and I think that just makes it, that ties in like something like Blood on Satan's Claw, which is just very parochial. It's like they just defeat him by kind of like reburying the bone or something like that, or setting it on fire. And it's almost like, what's that Dracula one where he kind of gets tied up in the bushes at the end, and that
Satanic Rites of Dracula. Yeah. But it's elemental stuff, isn't it? Dan was going to say something.
Yeah, I never really thought about the folk horror as a working class thing, because I guess my anchoring point is Penda's Femme, which sort of seems to be in the middle. But yeah, his journey to some kind of liberation is downwards rather than his aspiration towards institution. And it's the military in the background who are kind of doing these malevolent things. Yeah. That's a really interesting take. Love it.
I mean, obviously, like a lot of stuff, there's exceptions, but I think, Harvest is a classic example, isn't it, of something that dabbles in folk horror, and it's about how the poor people always get shafted by the rich, and I think that is, and the military as well is an aspect of that, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of taking a slightly left turn into, as you were growing up, what were those writers like James and Machen and Lovecraft and any other kind of horror writers? Were they an influence on you from an early age, or what did you go towards?
No, I came to them very late, actually. I didn't get to those until I was in my late 20s. I couldn't read until I was nearly 10. I just didn't click for me, and I'm still I'm not massively dyslexic, but I'm dyslexic. I've got dyscalculia, which is dyslexia with numbers. Which is slightly more debilitating. But yeah, I basically, all those kids' books that everybody, Stig the Dump or whatever, they just passed me by. So when I was about 9.5, my mum got me a Doctor Who and the Daleks, the Target book, and it was the first time I'd actually been presented with a book that I genuinely wanted to read. So I started with that, and I struggled, but I got through it, and then I went straight on to Doctor No. And then I read all the James Bond books. Then I read most of the James Hadley Chase thrillers, which I still love. I think it's brilliant storytelling. And then I sort of, hey, brilliant Dalek book there. And then I sort of left literature behind for most of my 20s. Really, I just was so into music and gigs and stuff. So yeah, I came to Lovecraft probably late 20s, early 30s. Oh, John Wyndham, actually, I read all the John Wyndham books when I was young. That's quite a big influence, I think. Yeah.
So when you say that side of things, that kind of the thriller, the kind of sci-fi stuff is maybe a deeper resonance if you go back to that age.
Yeah, I think so. I was utterly obsessed by Doctor Who in the 70s and basically in the 70s. By the 80s, I was sort of dipping in and out. But yeah, the Pertwee era and the sort of original Tom Baker. Yeah, I was utterly obsessed by that. But I've always, I'm pretty selective. I'm not interested in so much in sci-fi that's all set in space. I like stuff where the aliens come to us. I've seen, I think, even as a kid, I didn't bother going to see the Star Wars films. Just that big space opera thing. Yeah, it doesn't do it for me. It's like, I think, I don't know. There's a thing as well with like British stuff where it's all a bit make, do and mend. If you think there's things like, Man from U.N.C.L.E. and all that, it's all like they've got all the gear and all that, and then you look at like the British stuff, it's not quite the same. So I think I like that with sci-fi as well. I like a bit of reality in my sci-fi.
A little bit of that ragtag kind of thing. One of my favorite films from that era is Psychomania, and it just looks like they've just slapped that together with with whatever they had lying around, and it's absolutely brilliant.
But it's ideas triumph, don't they? It's like you've got a good cast, good script, great idea, and pretty good score as well. So it's it's
the word mother is fuzz.
Yeah.
Summer's always on my tracks, and in a dark room you'd see more than you think. I'm out of my place, gotta get back. I sweated a lot, you could feel the violence. I got shears pointed straight at my chest. Slow when you count it. I'm better than them and I think I'm the best. But I'll appear at midnight when the films close, 'cause I'm in a trance. When I sweat. Local Lodestone. Local Lodestone. And at that dark sunset, my brother and I, we walked up back, far from the tower. The land sea breeze ruffles the cloud, skin is bleeding. Cheers for the dead! Cheers for Local Lodestone! Local Lodestone!
One thing I love about that film as well is it does that thing that I wish people did more in dream sequences, where they cut all the sound, so the dream just plays out in silence, and I think that makes it so otherworldly. Polanski does it in Macbeth as well, which is one of Mark's favourite films, funnily enough. But yeah, that thing of like draining all the diegetic sound, I just find that really creepy. It's not done nearly enough. But yeah, Psychomania is a treat. And it's like, there's a lot of those films, like the Pete Walker films, which I love. And the scene has been, a bit trashy, or it's like a bit seedy. You think, no, that's the real Britain. That's the real Britain. That's the real life of people in those tatty kitchens and those sort of ill-lit streets. That's Britain at that time. And to call it grubby, I think a bit disrespectful. That's people's real lives. Not everybody's living in swish apartment.
No. Alistair, what have you got? What have you got there?
Psychomania. Beryl Reid was like brilliantly cast in that. And people like Irene Handel, they should have like really gone for the, so some of the people who were in like the old Ealing comedies, the old battle axes, they could have been cast very, very well in a lot of sort of British horror stuff. Do you think is it like culturally between? I mean, we're talking a lot of British horror stuff here, but how do you think it compares to sort of like Asian and like American kind of horror when it comes down to the films?
I went through a period. I think Asian horror had like an absolute golden age from around about 98 through to probably 2005. I just devoured those films, and it was quite difficult to see live screenings. So I built up quite a collection of those tartan DVDs. And I think some of that stuff is. I think particularly at the time that Asian horror was so refreshing because there was no raised eyebrows. We come from a period like Scream and all that stuff where it's so knowing. It's like got an over. It's almost critiquing itself as it's going along. You got people referring to horror movies within the horror, all that stuff, which is it's fun, but it's ultimately distancing. I think it turns it more into a spectacle, and I think a lot of the best things like. The original version of The Eye, I think, is a phenomenal piece of horror. The scene in the lift in that is just like so utterly unnerving. I think things that the Pang brothers were doing, I think Hideo Nakata's stuff at that point, and things like Chaos as well, the kidnap film. I think it's just there's this outpouring of really high quality horror, and then I think after that you start to get the American remakes and so on. So it's sort of I think it became a bit self-aware. Yeah. I think things are probably best when they're just absolutely going for it. So I think that period of Asian horror was fantastic. I've not kept on top of it recently. I would say 75% of what I see at the cinema is horror, to be honest with you.
The old video nasties.
Yeah, that sort of period passed me by a bit. I wasn't really. I think at that stage I was at art school and I was completely submerging myself in Tarkovsky, Antonioni, all those things, which I still dearly love. So yeah, I didn't have that. I was probably just a little bit too old for the video nasty thing, but certainly things that at the time were sort of spoken of as like, these are virtually snuff movies. And you see them now and you think, no, they're just really good. Things like Driller Killer, they're just really good, tense thrillers. I'm not so interested in the more sort of Mondo, sort of Faces of Death and all that kind of stuff. I find it a bit too, I don't know, just doesn't engage me. And just shock and gross out for its own sake doesn't do it for me. Sorry.
Yeah, some of the cannibal films were a bit kind of like one-dimensional, just going for like the shock thing, which, and like you're saying, like a lot of the modern American films, I thought they were just trying to make you jump. It was like a lot of it was the sound production and things like that were really built into it, and it became like just fucking boring. Well, there you go.
Yeah, no, jump scares. It's like, okay, you can have a jump scare in something, that's fine, but it's easy to do. We could do a jump scare now. Do you know what I mean? I could get, somebody to come in and leap from the side. That would do it. They're not hard to do, and I think. I don't know. It's what you got on the palate, isn't it? I don't mind jump scares, but if that's all you're going to do, and certainly some recent horror films, that is all. I think that's a total wind up. Have you seen La Bête? French film, I think it was last year or the year before. I think it was the year before. Is with Maya Seydoux, Leah Seydoux, who was the Bond girl in that. That's a really fascinating film and genuinely unsettling. It's sort of not a horror, but it's got trace elements of horror. It's about this notion that you can go into your past lives, revisit your past life, and erase the trauma that's causing you stress in your current life, but it's very abstract. It's a bit Lynchy.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway, bit of a sidebar, but I'd really recommend that. Yeah.
Let me take a slight kind of detour into so you worked as an assistant at Icon, right? But from what I understand, you kind of missed the perverted by language kind of videos. But yeah, what was going on in your life at that time, and what did you take from that experience at Icon and working with in factory and all that stuff?
It was so I was excuse me, I was 17, 18, so I was at Blackburn College, Tech College. And I was doing art, and I wanted to do video stuff as well, because I'd always been interested in film, and it's sort of what's led me to what I'm doing now, really. And there was a guy there called Brian Nicholson, who was the tech support guy for the college, and still there, doing all the audiovisual stuff. And we just really connected. And there was this thing where you were supposed to sort of book these video cameras like so far in advance, and we just really connected. And so it was basically I could go in and do stuff whenever I wanted. So he and I made some films together, and I had a band at the time, and we did some sort of just like knocked together videos. But we sent some of the stuff that Brian and I'd done to Factory. They were just about to open up the hacienda, and saying, are you interested in this? And they said, yeah, come on. And then Brian started doing like working for Icon, making the promo videos, and I sort of tagged along and did a bit of assistant editing and making the teas and stuff. And it was all done in the basement of Tony Wilson's house in Didsbury. And I was a huge, an enormous fan of Factory, and I'd followed Joy Division around when I was younger and so on, and it felt magical. I can't pretend that I was playing it cool. I just felt what an amazing place to be. I think one of the things that I carried from that was Tony he was out working most of the time, but he'd come back at the end of the day and he'd look at what we'd done, and sometimes we'd work into the night, and he'd be sitting chatting and stuff. And the greatest thing he gave me was he included me in the conversation. Everybody there was much more qualified with their opinions than I was, but he'd sort of say, he'd ask me what I thought, or if I chipped in, he wouldn't sort of think, well, this is a 17-year-old kid talking. He was interested in everybody. So I'll be eternally grateful for that. I think that built my confidence, at that point, because I was a very shy lad, I think, in a lot of respects. Yeah. Do
you think Mez was referring directly to him in The North Will Rise Again?
Almost certainly. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because he says Tony, doesn't he? And I think,
it's a beautiful character piece.
Fantastic piece of work.
I wanted to briefly ask you about, please touch on your F.A.L.L.O.U.T.P.O.D.C.A.S.T part of as a part of an answer to this, but this idea of the kind of northern eccentric in your writing, or your interest in kind of like quirkier characters, and not necessarily northern, because I know you've talked about Hancock before, and Wire are one of your favorite bands, but how does that eccentricity tie into your interest as a writer?
I don't know. Do you know? I don't think I ever really see it as eccentricity. I don't know what I see. I think I just see it as like getting into the nerves of a character, I suppose. And I was having a conversation the other day with Joanna Neary, who's the actress and comedian, and I've known her for like 35 years, and she's been part of the Ideal Tour playing Judith. She's an amazingly gifted comedy actress, and we were talking about how everybody in the cast is sort of what is now called neuroatypical, and we were just saying, well, actually, I don't know any creative person who isn't. If I meet somebody and they go, I'm a painter, I'm a writer, and I think, you're pretty fucking normal, though. I just sort of doubt it. I doubt their credentials somehow. So I think those are the people I gravitate towards. So those are the people I find myself writing about, I suppose. A lot of what I do, I think, is quite instinctive in terms of the writing. I just go with it, and I just trust that something good's going to come out of it. And there's that brilliant William Burroughs quote where he says that the best writing is like table tapping, and I think that's the thing. If I'm sitting down thinking, right, I need to write this kind of thing, I'll get there, but I'll and and I'll just take me longer. Whereas if I just treat it more like automatic drawing, psychic automatism, just get in there and just see what happens, and then make the decisions later. I think you can't critique something whilst you're doing it. You got to just do it and then see what comes up and make it better.
Yeah,
version in it, really. It's a bit like jazz.
Yeah, I think because the thing is, it's like when I talk, I sometimes lecture on screenwriting from time to time. One of the things I always say to like new writers is your first draft can only be your first draft. It's going to have stuff in it that you don't like, that makes you cringe, that you think, oh, that's a miles away from what I was trying to say. But you don't have to show it to anybody. Just keep polishing it, keep hacking away till it becomes what you want it to be. So yeah, start out with everything starts out as improvisation. So just take it from there. You can always refine it.
Well, how did that work with? So I was I heard that when you put in the pitch for the Dr. Terrible's House of Horrible, or Horrible House of Terrible, I'm not sure what order, but you put it into Coogan and Co. And then you said once it got accepted, you were very quickly having to make it. So how did you kind of deal with not having that time to be able to kind of do that process that you just described?
I was really, really fortunate because I'd written a radio series before that, and I'd written quite a few stage shows, but I had never written a TV thing before. And the arrogant young man that I was, I just thought, I'll nail this. But I think I really overwrote. I did scenes that were too classic mistake that novice writers make. Scenes that were too long, too many big speeches, too many scenes, all this kind of stuff. But I could not have been more fortunate because I was working with Henry Normal, who was co-running Baby Cow and also script editing and producing. The word genius gets bandied around a lot, but he is a genius. And I ask anybody who's worked with him, and they will say what they've taken away from the experience. So Henry was really good at keeping an overview on everything and just making sure we were sort of editing stuff down. There was this idea that Henry and I would do these like I do the first draft, Henry and I do like the second draft together, and then that we'd do a third draft with Steve. Steve was playing Tony Wilson, funnily enough, doing 24-hour Party People, and the shoot took longer than we thought. So he didn't have much time to work on them, and I think that's my one regret looking back at that series. It's like we could have done with just another week would have made a difference in terms of like polishing the scripts up, because there was stuff that we left a bit. There's a couple of scenes. I mean, they got sorted out, but a couple of scenes that are a little bit like placeholder scenes, not quite placeholders, but things we hadn't polished up and said, right, we'll give this to Steve. Steve will. And some of them got that treatment, some didn't, because we just ran out of time. But yeah, it's happened a couple of times to me where I had that, and also I did a series called Nightmare Worlds of H.G. Wells, and that moved really quickly as well. And it's the opposite of the usual experience. Usually, you can be 2-3 years. I've got something I've been developing, and we're into year 3 now. And it's going really well, and it's great. But will it happen? I don't know. But yeah, every so often, and quite often I'd love to think, it's because my scripts are so irresistible. They couldn't wait to make them. But sometimes it's as brutal as, we've got this money left over. We need to make something now. Otherwise, we'll have to give this money back. So they take you on board or whatever. That wasn't the case with Dr. Terrible's. But it's amazing when somebody goes, and you look at the calendar and you think, right, that's 9 weeks away. It's scary stuff. But then, good for focusing the brain.
It stands up as one of the earliest of those kind of like British kind of tongue-in-cheek horror. Obviously, League of Gentlemen kind of stuff and other stuff came after it. It holds up. Witch Locator I watch on a regular basis.
Right.
It's one of my favorite kind of, but and I like that idea. You took a very stock genre thing and you kind of imbibed it with a really kind of fun take, which everyone's had to go to the witch trials, and but I think it's a fun thing. But
some nights I'm alone, I sit here on my own. Then from your room I hear laughter. I must take a walk, we'll get together and talk. Oh, the morning after. Oh, the morning after. I'm on my way way I'll find something to say when I get there to your room. People may stare, but I really don't care. Oh, the morning after. Oh, the morning after.
We live in a strange and mysterious town.
Well, how does kind of genre work into kind of when you're writing? Are you happy to lean into it, or do you push back against it, or?
I think I just collage in whatever I think feels right. I'm quite interested in how things work outside of genre as well. Like if you put an element from another genre into, I don't know. It's like Spaced was very good at that. I think that suddenly it would look like it was a high octane thriller when it was about something really banal. I mean, I don't tend to do that kind of stuff, but I because I think that's very. That's sort of double underlining itself. Whereas I don't like to hear the gears shift. If I have a scene that's like where it's sort of romantic and then the next scene is very surreal, I don't want it jarring. I want it to feel like it's of the same world. So I think I probably work quite hard on that, making sure it all sort of fits together. I mean, I try not to analyze what I do too much, because I sort of know what works, but I'm quite wary of getting into a comfort zone with stuff. And I think if whatever I'm doing, when I finish it, I always want the next thing I do to be quite different. Either it's going from a script to a book, or just going from something that's full on horror to something that's more sort of down tempo. I don't know. Yeah, I always like to switch around, so I'm using different parts of my brain.
Yeah, well, no more true than going from Hex Induction Hour to Room to Live.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about the Fall.
Let's talk about the Fall. That's why we're here. It's enough about me.
Do you think Mark had precog?
Yeah, I think he did. I think the alcohol as well was a way of dampening down the input. I think he was getting so much input from different things, and I think he was told when he was quite young that he had psychic ability, and I'm a great believer in that. I've visited a number of psychics over the years, and I think Mark had it's difficult to quantify these things and difficult to sort of like definitively label stuff. But I think he was in touch with elemental forces, you know, and that could sound a bit wholemeal and a bit wanky, but I just think, because I think with psychics, I think even if you say it is just an incredibly advanced form of intuition, I'm still impressed by that, because most people don't have it. And it's like the information that you can get, you know, even if it is just intuition, the information you can draw out from that is phenomenal. I've seen psychics who've been able to tell me quite hard and fast information about friends of mine who they've never met. They're just reading through me. You know, I think a good psychic is a phenomenal thing. But yeah, I think Mark's aperture was very wide. I think he took in all kinds of stuff, and I think that's one of the great things you see in his lyrics is he's collaging and everything. I mean, he would hate this, but he is almost the definitive postmodern writer. I think in that he draws on all the sort of stuff, like a mixture of highbrow and lowbrow, mixing the, you know, making the author a character within what he's doing, sort of colliding sort of lowbrow stuff like sci-fi or pulp or whatever, highbrow thing, gothic references, the sort of intertextuality. It's all classic postmodernism, and I think he was just doing it all intuitively. And that's what happens, you know, that overused phrase, the zeitgeist. There's a number of people doing similar things at the same time. Graham Lewis of Wire, I think, is in a very different way, but he's another lyricist from that era who's collaging things in. But Mark is the king of this, I think, and also he's not doing it. I mean, there's things like what's that website, Annotated Fall. He's not doing it for that. I think he secretly loved the fact that people did want to get in amongst it. But, you know, as he said very well, there's no lyric sheets. You know, there's collected lyric books later, but again, he's selective. It's not all of them. He's not doing it to sort of say, oh, look how clever I'm being. Look, there's reference to this, this, and this. Because some of it is buried so deep that it's like there's no clues. You've really got to know what the reference is to know. And if you look at the Annotated Fall website, it's the work of many hands to decipher some of these things. And I think he's just doing it because that's what felt right for him. It's all intuition, and I love that.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of them being open to the stories around him, and a lot of the TV. I mean, we looked at Susan versus Youth Club the other week, just to rewrite an episode of Neighbours, but to cast it through some weird filter as well. And it's like, that's a bold move for someone who doesn't give a fuck, or both.
Absolutely. He is not. He's not tethered to any conventions of songwriting. It literally can be about anything. And I think that's, you know, it is that thing. It's a scrapbook. It's a scrapbook of ideas and influences. And I think at Susan versus Youth Club, it's such a great groove as well. You know, it's a real nod along groove, that. So it's like he's putting some seemingly quite daft scenario, you know, with that, rather than making it into a sort of chanty dance track, he's taken it in a very different direction.
Yeah. Do you buy into the idea that he was some kind of shaman in terms of that rock and roll kind of icon, or does that not?
I don't know. I don't. What? It depends how you differ. What is what's the purpose of a shaman? I'm not sure. I want to think. It's more, rather than a shamanic ritual, it's more like a sermon, isn't it? I suppose, in a way, it's more like he's declaiming and exclaiming, and they're bulletins, aren't they? Some of what he's saying. Yeah, I'm not sure about the shamanic thing. I mean, he's obviously, you know, things like Hip Priest obviously dabble in that a little bit, but even so, he's slightly taking the piss out of himself at the same time there, I think. But yeah, it's the idea that he's, again, the Burroughs thing, table tapping, that he's just drawing these things down from the ether, you know, and putting it all together. I think it's more like a preacher or a medium to me than a shaman. Yeah. If we're trying to define it, and I'm not sure that's the right thing to do, I don't know.
It's just a fun way to look at it and to see what was the effect. You know, obviously Hex Induction Hour being in theory cast as a spell, but also very much tongue in cheek. Everything's done with that kind of daring you to take it seriously.
Yeah. It's all a roll of the dice, isn't it? It's just like, does this work? Will this connect? Yeah. You know, does this mean anything? Yeah,
but that's the graft part of it. Just making sure you're writing and you're doing it, and you're, you know, in terms of your would you consider yourself prolific and needing to just go back and keep going and keep working and making it not necessarily better, but just doing the next great good thing or the thing you need to express?
Yeah, I just want to empty out my head. I think is part of it.
Yeah.
I'm just obsessed by writing and always have been, and I get asked about this a lot. But yeah, writing's one of the things I want to be doing the most, and I struggle with holidays for that reason. It's like 2 or 3 days I'm fine, and then I'm just thinking, let's get that laptop out. I've got this idea. I want to get it down. So yeah, and I think. That it's all that'll be left, isn't it? The work, and I just sort of think, I love it. I can't think. I don't know why everybody doesn't want to be a writer. I don't know why everybody doesn't want to get their thoughts out and made manifest. Because it's my job, but it's also very therapeutic. It's my obsession, and also I just find maybe it's something about the way I write, but part of what I'm doing is finding out what I think about things. It's only through writing I fully understand what it is I think about stuff. I realise this is sounding very new agey and very sort of little risk of sounding indulgent. But if I hadn't at some point connected with an audience, I would probably still be doing it. But I think the fact that I have got an audience and there is some interest in what I do, extremely gratifying. And that's doing the Ideal tour now. It's like there's two things that I hear a lot, and one is people saying it's really surreal, but the thing I hear more than that is people saying, "Oh, it's just like my life," or that just really reminds me of me and my mate. So, and I think so it's the two things. So it's really surreal, but it's very lifelike at the same time. Yeah. And I think I find that really gratifying to hear, because sometimes I've been told production companies approach me and say, "Oh, we really like your stuff because it's really strange and unusual." So they commission a script, or then you present the script and go, "Oh, it's a bit weird and unusual." You think, "Oh, the thing you liked about the other weird and unusual thing I did was the fact that it was already successful. You don't want to take a risk on this because it's weird." And I don't think what I do is that weird, to be honest with you. I think a lot of it is very true to life. But no, yeah. I don't intend on stopping. And this, I remember really clearly having this conversation with Mark, and I was saying that my dad sort of never retired. He was an electrical rep, and he never retired. And I said, I don't see myself retiring. I said, I think even if nobody's interested in what I write, I'll just carry on writing it. I do. And Mark going, "Yeah, fuck it. Why would you want to retire? Want to be somebody who fucking used to do something?" And I just, yeah, that's it. I don't want to be somebody who used to do something. I want to be somebody who's still doing something.
Study, an academic needed his chin, sent in the dust of some cheap magazines. His academic rust could not burn them up. Wings, 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 wings. you pass by, my pulse starts beating fast. My love's so strong that it just lasts and lasts. I can't help myself for the way I feel. Help myself, 'cause my love is real. Help myself for the way I feel about you. I must be mad. 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 I must be mad.
Right, we'll go here. Just been to the park.
The pass.
We too do not recognise the MU. We come with our hands open in fiendship. We can lead you to proletariat visions of posterity. WMC.
You were very clear that when you were writing with Mark, although it wasn't necessarily, maybe a 50-50 split, it was definitely a very strong collaboration, and that it wasn't just you kind of tidying up his words or having an influence. So kind of, how do you view that now, looking back at that process, like, more than 10 years later or whatever, of being in that room with Mark, and how does that compare to other people you've written with?
I think usually when I write with people, and I do a lot of work of mine, but I also collaborate with people, I usually tend to be, and this is the way it quite often divides, I usually tend to be the person at the keyboard. I'm happy not to be, and I have been in writing relationships where I'm the person who's like sitting there or pacing around or whatever. But I tend to be the person at the keyboard, so that's what I was in that. But having said that, Mark would send me. So there's some scenes in there. There's a lot of scenes in there that we wrote together. There's a lot that I wrote on my own, and there's a lot that he wrote on his own. And it's somehow, and then you always go through stuff again, But I remember early on, I can't remember who it was now, somebody was saying to me, what's he do? Is he just like saying mad stuff and then you'll turn it into a script? I said, no, he's sending me like pages and pages of dialogue, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And I just sort of thought early on, I sort of thought, right, well, I need to accept the fact that this might not go anywhere. And we had several runs at it. So we initially pitched a TV series and wrote out some episodes. It was like an anthology thing, more like a Twilight Zone type stuff. Sorry, Dan, you were going to say?
Well, it was more to just come in after you've finished this thought.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. I just sort of thought this might not come to anything, but just see what happens. Just see how it flows. And so we did this pitch. Nobody was interested. We did another pitch, which was a similar sort of thing, like an anthology series, but based around one character who was like an electrician, sort of partly based on my dad. But his life was a musical, a bit like singing detectivish, but it was all going to be Fall songs. I don't know why they didn't go for that. Fucking idiots. And that didn't happen. But the thing is, a lot of it weirdly was people just going, I think he'll just be too difficult to work with. And I just said, he's not a Neanderthal. Do you know what I mean? He's just like, and it's like with me, he was always courteous, generous, kind. I would say loving, really. We had such a really sort of like sweet relationship. And I think because I wasn't a rhythm guitarist. Yeah. I wasn't a keyboardist. I think it had a very different relationship. I think it was that thing of like they were the workers, and I think because he primarily saw himself as a writer. Yeah. I think he just saw me as another writer, and we connected, and we were very different, but we had a good laugh, and bit like Tony, really. I think Mark was interested in a wide range of people, a wide range of things. So I don't think you had to be like Mark in order to gain his trust or attention, you know. So yeah, the way it sort of coalesced was, it's one of those things, a bit like when I don't do jigsaws, but when I was a kid and do jigsaws, and you sort of working it, and then you sort of think, oh no, it's almost done. And I definitely had a moment with that where I was in, I think, Bristol or Bath, and I was working on a Count Arthur show, but we were finishing rehearsals really early because I think Steve had something else to do, and so I sort of had the end of the afternoon and the evening. So I just thought, I'll just collate stuff together. And I remember putting out pieces of paper and stuff and thinking, oh no, this is it. We've got it. I was thinking we need to do another couple of months, weeks work on it, and I just thought, oh no, we've got all the parts here. So I did the draft that tied it all together, because we had a lot of disparate scenes and we knew where it was going. And then I sent that to Mark, and then we met again and spent a couple of afternoons in a hotel room just going through it. And we didn't change it that much, actually. We could have. There's a scene of Mark's that I really like, but he was very keen to have cut out, where there's a bit where I think it's Len and the other character who the young guy who comes to the studio, they're outside, and this stone or slate just falls from the heavens and just misses them. And I really like that, but he wanted to have that cut out, so we cut that out. But yeah, it was. I think he trusted. In the way he probably trusts musicians, I think he trusted me that I could make the form work. And so the content could be, it's a bit like the last 10 years of seeing the Fall live, where the band are bulletproof. They're just there. They're so tightly drilled. It's just they're bulletproof. So then he can extemporize over the top how he wants. And I think I'm reasonably good on structure as a writer. So I think we had like the structure sort of pretty much in place, but I always my attitude is like, get a structure now, but then feel free to change it if a better idea comes up, so yeah, that's how it was.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dan,
given that the very many things you've written end up on screen looking quite different despite the through line of your presence, did you have any kind of like reference points between you and Mark of what the otherwise might look like in terms of visual reference, or is that out of your hand?
I think we had vague ideas. I think we would initially obviously Psychomania was something we talked about, but we didn't. It's drawing a few of the images from Psychomania more than anything else. We talked about that. We talked about Night Gallery quite a bit. I think we just saw, thought we'd see how it would come out. I'm still disappointed it's not. I was very disappointed we couldn't get it off the ground while Mark was still alive. And we came close a couple of years ago. We had like an actor who was up for playing Mark, and it was really good. And we had Pollard and Forsyth on board, the directors who did the Nick Cave stuff and Scott Walker stuff, and who were lovely people. I would love to work with them again in some. But we just couldn't get the finance together. I mean, it is incredibly hard to get films made, and I've worked on a number of films in a capacity as a script editor and so on, and it's like I'm always just amazed that anything gets made, because you've got to go through so many hoops. The process is glacial, and I've got a couple of films I'd still love to make. Whether or not I'll get to make them, I don't. But I'd love to think the otherwise could get out there, because I think it could be really creepy apart from anything else. I think it's got a good sense of unease about.
Yeah, well, one of the things that it said that Mark said he wanted to write something really weird and properly frightening. And I just wondered what you thought that meant and how you felt the otherwise embodied that.
I think I like the idea that it's like it takes a while. Some of my favourite films are things I just can't quite get a handle on to begin with. And I think hopefully that's true of the otherwise. I think it takes a while to figure out like what all the different elements are. That in fact these are Jacobites and they've slipped through from another time, or they're living in a parallel space or whatever. Mark was a fan of Ben Wheatley's work, and obviously I've worked with Ben quite a lot. And we talked early on about the potential of Ben directing, and Ben read the script and loved it, but that didn't quite come together. But and I think I think the visual style, I'm not sure how it would have come together. And I think the thing is, it's like I've directed a few bits and pieces, but I've got no real ambitions to direct a film. I think it'd keep me away from my writing too long. But I just think if you choose the right people to collaborate with, then you don't need to tell them what to do, you know. And I think if we got a good director, and they would have brought in their own visual sort of stamp on it, and you know, that would have been cool, I think. But you know, there's still a chance it could still come to fruition. Every so often, I think, right, let's dust that off and see if we can get anybody interested, you know.
But a couple of questions on that. First was, I mean, every time it's come up, someone's talked about casting Smith, and for me, the question was, in your mind, now we have to cast him as an actor. Are you playing it kind of straight, like I know they cast someone for 24-hour Party People and it never made the cut, or I'm thinking of like, what if that, you know, that Queen biopic, if they'd gone with Sacha Baron Cohen as Freddie Mercury instead of Mr. Robot Guy. So in that sense, did you ever think about whether, you know, kind of whether you play it straight with Mez, or whether you're looking for someone who's a bit more of a character?
I don't know. I mean, I think that if you read the script, and interestingly, most of the dialogue that Mark speaks in the script was written by me. Right. But he didn't have, you know, there's odd lines here and there, but of course a lot of that was taken from me observing him and thinking, right, I mean, I've got a reasonably good ear for people's cadence and so on. So, but you know, he never questioned it, and I think. I don't know. I think it's fairly straight. I think it's a fairly straightforward representation of him. It's not too caricatured. There was a thing early on when we were talking about it, and we were quite stoned, to be honest. We were talking about one of the scenes where we're in the studio, and he said, "Oh, I could have like in Terminator, I could have like, you know, he cuts his POV, and there's all the sort of like digital information, like weighing up whether or not he should sack a member of the band." And we laughed about it, but then in the end, it felt too knowing, it felt too silly, and also it felt like it was playing into the sort of public perception of Mark rather than what Mark's actually like. I think he was up for it because he was like taking the piss out of himself. But in the end, we just said, I think this probably nudges it outside of the drama. I think because the thing about the otherwise, it's quite intimate. You're quite in there with the characters, and I think that would have we just in the end we just decided it was a bit too daft. Really,
it was kind of that idea that, but by imagining Mark in that role, he brings a lot of his backstory to it. And I kind of wondered, an actor who wasn't Mark, whether I'm looking at Mark, I'm thinking he's, you know, he's precog, he's got this attitude and stuff. So it would have to be someone that kind of brought that, that presence.
Well, funnily enough, just about the time it came out, I did an interview for The Guardian about it. And the day after that came out, Christopher Eccleston got in touch. And he was a huge Fall fan, and he said, "Look, you know, I'm not sure we're doing this, but I would love to play Mark." Wow. And so we met up, and we've since become really good friends. And we've been developing a script together, which I can't really talk about. But anyway, so we met, and I think initially Chris thought it was the lead character, and it's not. It's a sort of more of an ensemble piece. But also, as soon as I met Chris, I just thought, Chris is quite ripped. He's big, he's tall, and Mark was and I just thought the physicality wasn't quite right. I'm not sure that he couldn't have done it. I think he could have been very good. And also, he's a Salford lad. It's like, you know, there's a lot to sort of recommend him doing it. But yeah, the physicality wasn't quite right, and I think that's. What's the film Naked? Have you seen? You know,
Thulis is the other one, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant performance. So I think, you know, it may have been better to have got a complete unknown. You know, some young lad who you know, that you couldn't project on. I mean, that was a great thing about Sam Riley as Curtis, in that you know, he'd done bits and pieces, but including obviously playing Mark, but he was a bit of a blank canvas as far, so it was easy for people to sort of see him as Curtis. I think it's a great performance.
It's great. It's when you get and the danger of the Sacha Baron Cohen route is that it ruins the entire thing.
Yeah,
right? You just know the tone.
Yeah, and I think he's an incredible talent. Sacha Baron Cohen, but I think there's a lot of technique on display with some, and I think, you know, and good technique as well. But I think you're seeing somebody do a turn, if you like, and I don't. You know, the film The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, which I when the first time I heard about that was when I was working on Dr. Terrible's with Steve Coogan, and Steve was saying I can't remember if he was considering playing it or they were considering him or something like that. And I remember thinking that will be spot on. I just thought Steve playing Peter Sellers, just thought, yeah, that's good. And I remember seeing it. And I still do think it's a good film. I think it's a nice script. I think it's a well put together film. And with Jeffrey Rush playing Sellers, and you just think great performance. But I don't believe that this persona would be the funniest guy in the UK at this point. And but I think if it was Steve Coogan, I think I could probably have bought that. So it's a fine line between whether you go with caricature, whether you go with a slightly bolder take, or if you go with something very naturalistic. Yeah. I think with Mark it would have to be naturalistic. I do. I think anything that felt like it was mimicking the public perception of him, I think works.
Yeah, and I guess that led to I wanted to ask about other stuff that Mark had written. But also your would it work as a stage play? Would it work to turn it in from the film into a production?
I don't know. I think you'd have to change a lot. And it's one of those things where I just sort of think, if you'd have to change so much, it'd be a different thing. So why not do a different thing to start with? Fair
enough. Yeah.
I mean, I can't really talk too much about it, but there is a possibility of doing something else Fall related as a stage play. So I'll keep it under my hat for now, but we're in the very early stages of talking about that. But that would be a completely different thing because it was written as a film, and I think part of it's about landscape. You're going to struggle on stage to get landscape in,
Absolutely. Well, I started thinking of Psychomania the musical, and I'm not sure if it would work. So.
I'm seeing it now.
But if we talk about the other stuff that Mark wrote, you said that early on you asked about a figure walks and maybe turning that into parts of the thing, and he didn't want to, and that makes perfect sense. But say the opportunity opened up for you, are there Fall songs like Wings, Spectre versus Rector, or even some of the other stuff Mark wrote that might become or lend themselves to short stories or weird fiction? Or is it best left alone?
Well, I think Mark thought it was best left alone. It's like he couldn't countenance the idea that we'd go back to something that was like decades old. Yeah. I mean, he didn't say, but he was like, no, that's not. I think it's quite easy to over romanticize these things and think, because there is so many literary references, there's so many characters and so on, that they are short stories. And it's like, I mean, there's a section in The Otherwise where I write about some of his like key, what I think are the sort of key sort of narrative stories. And I think even then there is a lot missing. What you're seeing is like little shards of story, of character, of incident. A lot of things are inferred. But again, that relates to sort of postmodernism in that you can have inchoate stories, you can have incomplete stories, you can have stories that don't have ending. So I think they sort of work on that level. I think they probably are in their prime form. I think anything else is going to dilute it a bit, but it's all there for the taking in terms of influence. What you do with them, and you're certainly interestingly, since Mark passed away, there's a lot of bands now doing what could loosely be termed sort of garage rock with sort of narratives and story and spoken word over the top. I mean, that's one of the sort of prime forms of the sort of top layer of the underground in terms of indie music, and a lot of it's good. Something like Dry Cleaning, I think that's excellent. Even, I mean, it's a very different sonically, but I think something like Wet Leg, it's like there's a lot of, talking, chanting over repetitive rhythms and stuff. They're a world away from the Fall, but would they exist without the Fall? Probably not.
No, it's at this point deeply ingrained, and we're doing one of a number of Fall podcasts now that the body of work is not going to change, and looking into it and just asking those questions, just as we've spent hundreds of episodes digging in and played around with like turning Wings into a short story and things like that. And it's like, but I think I'm coming to the conclusion that, they may be in their best form, and it might be best to leave them alone and just dream of these stories from time to time.
Yeah.
I think one thing we've had you for an hour and really appreciate your time. If I could ask one more.
I'm happy to carry on talking. Don't worry.
Okay.
If we're talking about the Fall, I'm in.
Yeah. What kind of society do we live in where drug dealers are persecuted and the mentally ill aren't kept in cages? Is one of my favorite lines. I don't know if that's going anywhere, but yeah. In terms of your life as a Fall fan, what has that meant to you? What are your highlights, and what has stayed with you and resonated deepest?
I think the first few times I saw them, because I was 15 and saw them first time at the end of 1978 at a Rock Against Racism gig at a little club called Kelly's in Manchester, and I told my mum I was going to a gig in Blackburn because I knew she wouldn't let me go to Manchester at night. I went, to stuff during the day, and so I got a coach and I was so excited, and all I'd heard was Stepping Out, Last Orders, and the Bingo Masters Breakout EP, and I was so excited, and they just absolutely delivered. And it was the first. I mean, I've seen it done loads of times since, but it was the first time I said, "Well, the band was say we're on stage, but there wasn't a stage. It was just like a floor." And I sort of started wandering into the audience and singing directly to people, and it just felt like the most transgressive act at that point. And also that thing that like it wasn't showbiz. There was not a hint of showbiz about it, And it's like I think that like a little while after that, I remember seeing the UK subs. I was just like I am now, go to as many gigs as I can, and like UK subs who was somehow being pitched as these sort of authentic street rebels, but there was so much showbiz in what they were doing, striking poses, their outfits, stroke costumes, all that stuff. And with the Fall, it was just like think, oh no, these are like people I know's elder brothers, was what I remember thinking. And just it was at the stage where Mark was still talking a lot between songs, which obviously later he completely got. And so he was just making these strange elliptical comments all the way through. It was like a non-stop performance. And he was talking about airplanes flying overhead, and then he was talking about picking stuff up on shortwave, and then he'd be talking about the bassist is tuning his guitar, and it was just this mad collage of stuff, and they look so cool. And afterwards, I just said to Mark, that was great, and he went, "Oh, cheers, cock," and that was it. And I just sort of thought, "Oh, great, I've been recognised." So that was brilliant. And then I've seen a couple of ropey gigs. I saw the one in Worthing that was atrocious. But you sort of look at the average, look at the number of gigs they played and the number of ones that weren't great. Because so many gigs I've seen where I just sort of thought, this is transcendent, and there's this sort of joke about, you never know what you're going to get, it could be rubbish and stuff like that. Yeah, very occasionally they could not be so good, but so many gigs were amazing. I think getting Mark in to play Jesus on Ideal, it's my proudest thing that I've done on TV. Definitely, it's one of my proudest things, and also it's double underlined because it's soundtracked by the music of Coil as well. So it's like I managed to get Mark Smith on TV playing Jesus, soundtracked by Coil, and I just think, I just love smuggling things into the mainstream because. So that's one of the things that Ideal's about. Ideal is partly about subcultures, be it sexual, pharmaceutical, societal, musical. It's about subcultures, and I just think just because it's a subculture doesn't mean it's a minority. There's massive amounts of people involved in stuff, and I knew they forget that. Loads of people would sort of see that for what it was, as Mark as Jesus, just thinking, right, this is. And I just thought as well, I could imagine it in like a Buñuel film where the guy who turns up as Jesus is just dressed as a bloke you'd meet down the pub.
Yeah,
and I think there's so much snobbery, and I think there's so much assumption about what people want and what people will accept that people won't go for stuff if it's atypical, if it's surreal, if it's strange. I think people are so much more open-minded than a lot of the mainstream platforms give them credit for. And I think just being able to get stuff like Mark and the Fall on television. Not that they'd not been on television before, but just particularly at that point, I think there was that thing of like, oh yeah, we love the Fall from the 80s. You think, yeah, that was good, but have you heard what they're doing now? Because it's pretty fucking special, And I just sort of thought, yeah, get it out there. So yeah, that's one of my abiding memories, and that's something I'm really proud of. And it led to us, I chatted to Mark a few times after gigs, but not really about much or for any of the time. And I'm just grateful that he then got in touch and we was able to be friends for the last sort of 10 years and work together. It just blows me away that somebody would, and I would have never said this to him because I'm not an idiot, but he was a hero and a huge influence, And it was great getting to know him to sort of see how many of the same things we loved as well. Particularly stuff like Lindsay Anderson and Oh Lucky Man, which is my favourite film, and it's one of Mark's favourite films. I was just thinking, oh right, yeah, it's like there's a lot of crossover here, you know. And I'm not measuring myself up to Mark at all. He's a major artist. I'm not, but it's just like been able to work with him and just get something out of both of our brains onto the page, even if it wasn't made in the end. Yeah, I feel really honoured, really grateful that I was able.
It's remarkable, and I think in some ways, and although this might be a bit of a cop out, the fact that it only exists in our imaginations right now, I think there is someone out there that could make it into something that's really special, but I wouldn't want as a fan for that to be disappointed by that on screen. And I think, you know, as good as Control was and as good as 24-Hour Party People was, for Mondays fans and Joy Division fans, a lot of them, it was very difficult to take that and say, like, this is a good representation of my dream and my herohood.
Yeah, and I think because it all means different things to different people, and you know what. I don't know. It's like what my favourite, the tunes that I want to listen to with the Fall, you know, could be completely different to what somebody else wants to listen to. And I think everything's got different resonances, and I think there's no way you can please everybody. In fact, you're more likely going to irritate more people than you're going to please with what you do. And you know, it's like like I say, we just come back from doing the Ideal tour, and then the response was like overwhelmingly positive. But somebody came up to the stage manager after one of the shows and said, the flat on stage doesn't look like anything like it did on television. I think, okay, right, well, it's 14 years later, so maybe he moved. But, you know, thinking, wow, what a thing to focus on, you know, and I was thinking, but yeah, there will always be people that, like, you know, for them, decor was the big problem. So you just
yeah, well, beautiful. I've got a million more questions, but I think we covered most of the good stuff. And yeah, I really appreciate spending the time with you, Graham, and I've loved your
pleasure.
stuff. Yeah, love Johnny in the Ideal, and yeah, I loved Gambon in the H.G. Wells thing, and him and Gambon and Thulis doing Endgame by Beckett is one of my favorites. Have you seen that one?
I wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, it's out there on the YouTubes, but it's worth
Oh, is
a
it?
watch.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah,
Right.
it's amazing. There's another version with Stephen Rea and what's the guy called who played Desmond? Dan, you know this name, right?
Norman Beaton.
Yeah, Norman Beaton and
Oh,
Stephen
right. Oh,
Rea,
wow.
and then the other version's Thulis and Gambon, and it's like it's absolutely fucking spectacular.
Oh, great.
But I digress. Thank you for talking to us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing it when it goes out. Yeah.
Take care, and
all right, man.
hope to see you again one day. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Cheers,
a lot.
Graham.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
guys. Take care. Bye.